Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the GSE conference so far. What I plan to do during this session is I want to first explain why DevOps is important and it's gaining momentum in the IMS space. And I want to show you in three different parts. First, the explanation of DevOps in the IMS environment first, and a general description of what DevOps is. Then what I want to do is I want to divide the DevOps practice into two parts. The first part is the development tasks that would be needed to shift left your testing into the development process using our CompuWare solutions. That is the left side of a CI/CD toolchain infinity loop. And then I also want to explain from an operational side of that equation, those things that we would do and BMC has done for many years on the ops side, which is the management of the database, the management of the system side of that equation. And then what we've introduced recently, which is our change management solutions, which allow you to change the IMS system dynamically with an integration into the DevOps CDI toolchain of choice that you have, and also change management from the DBA perspective so that those new DBAs that are coming into the environment or universal DBAs can be very effective at what they do. So why is it, do I say that DevOps is gaining momentum in the mainframe space? Well, BMC does a survey over the last 16 years, and this last survey that we did actually surveyed 1,300 mainframe users, both users of BMC solutions and non-users of BMC solutions. Of those surveyed, 78% said citing application velocity as being very useful to move agile development into their environments. 56% of those people indicated that they are now using DevOps on the mainframe, and 77% of organizations have DevOps practices in place. And what's important about that particular metric is that since 2018, that metric has increased 33%. The title of this session is really this last metric in the right side of the metrics that I'm providing. 74% of those surveyed report that they're seeing ROI within 1 year of implementing DevOps practices into the mainframe. They also cite three other benefits. 37% cited that they get improved stability of the code that they're writing. At the same time, which is diametrically opposed to that, they're seeing application quality improve. So as velocity is improving, they're also improving the quality of the code that's being delivered to the users. And the third thing is that security, 35% indicate that security has increased. So DevOps is definitely coming into the mainframe space. So what is DevOps? Well, as I cited in the previous slide, 56% of organizations are already using DevOps. Well, what does that mean? That means that 44% of users really haven't started down this DevOps path. And so I think putting a definition on DevOps is really, really important. It had its beginnings with agile developments from a development perspective. And this was really to bridge the gap between all of the organizations that are doing development processes. From developers, they wanted to develop a more efficient, effective software, and they wanted to integrate the quality assurance processes in with the code development as it was being done. The other thing on the other side of the equation is the operations people. Once the code is developed, they want to be able to build the application and stand that application up. They want to be able to validate that that application is delivering what the application was designed to do. And they want to be able to quickly deploy and deliver and support that application once it is completed. Before DevOps, everything was done via waterfall. And basically the business analyst would do the requirements and programming requirements and develop the requirements based upon what the customer had wanted in a particular application change or an application. Development would code that, and once they got done coding that particular application, they probably moved on to another coding effort, and it was turned over to application or to the QA folks that are doing the testing. They would do the testing based upon what the specs contained, and then it was turned over to operations and of course over to support that application. So as the development effort, which sometimes was 18 months, 24 months maybe, as that development process was elongated, the scope of the application changed, new requirements were added, so you had scope creep, and what may have been delivered and may have been tested was very different from the original specs. So there was this natural love-hate relationship between the organizations, and it elongated that delivery process. DevOps, on the other hand, is trying to simplify the development process by providing continuous integration and continuous delivery into a tool chain of choice. The other thing that's very, very important from a DevOps terminology perspective is to be able to add automation into the process so that points of failure are removed. You can improve the velocity of development, and at the same time improve the quality, making sure that your FTE costs and those things that are associated with delivering the code are very efficient, and that you can measure what's been delivered so that you can alter your development processes to cut down on the cost and improve speed. Because the important thing here is then in the digital economy, you want to improve and increase the velocity, but you don't want to at the same time reduce the quality of code that's being delivered. Excuse me there, I had to take a drink. So the DevOps goal is really the same team approach. You want to improve deployment frequency, you want to achieve faster time to market, you want to shorten lead time between fixes when you have to make fixes to the code, you want to lower the failure rate of new releases that are being implemented in your environment, and you want to, if there is a problem, you want to reduce the mean time to recovery to repair that situation. So what do we mean by modernizing the IMS tool chain? Well, we have mapped the IMS tool chain into an automation process that has two parts. The first part on the left side of this infinity loop are those development tasks that would be associated with being able to do your code development, do your program analysis, bringing in test data into the testing process, being able to build your portfolio of test cases so that you understand all of the how much of your code has been tested with the test cases that you have, and then of course being able to debug problems when those problems occur, and then also understand the operational characteristics of that program once it's introduced so that you can not negatively affect the performance of your applications. And then of course delivery, being able to integrate the delivery process. So once it's turned over to the operational side of the infinity loop, that you're not affecting the performance of this program, as well as all of the programs in this application. So let's look at the left side of that infinity loop first. About 2 years ago, BMC acquired the CompuWare solutions, and those actually complement what BMC has been doing over decades. It is the integration of the development process into a CI/CD workflow of choice. These are the 6 solutions that I will be discussing, and the solutions that CompuWare has delivered to the marketplace to be able to integrate your development process into an agile development testing environment. So how do you equip your next-gen developers? Well, basically, in order to improve the development process, you have to improve what the developers are actually using, providing them with an intuitive IDE platform. In this case, I'm talking about CompuWare's Topaz and ISPW interactive a way of doing development. It allows you to quickly access all of the productivity tools from a GUI interface that allows you to integrate the development, the program analysis, and all of the things that are required to do the testing at the same time that the code is being developed. You can understand visually what that program is doing side by side with the code changes that you're making. And when you're doing the testing and the unit test, both the unit testing from a developer perspective, as well as the regression testing from a QA perspective, that you've incorporated all of the data and the testing use cases that are needed to effectively determine whether that program is being effectively tested. The developer really has a different perspective when it comes to testing. They're probably only going to test how the program is supposed to work. That's only 50% of those testing requirements. On the other side of the equation, it's the QA person. They take a different perspective. And so to be able to do that at the same time that the code is being developed is very, very important. While you're doing the coding, it's very, very important to be able to integrate auto completion and syntax expansion with SonarSource. We've done that. We've also implemented SonarLint, which strengthens the code quality and standards. This enables earlier issue resolution to prevent future expenses. When you are able to do testing and integrate the data into the testing process earlier in your development work, you can find problems much quicker. This minimizes the code complexity to ease maintenance over time and reduce your FTE costs for maintaining that code. While the developer is doing the code, we provide a modern ID interface to what used to be FileAid. It allows you to bring the right data into the testing process. You can browse and edit data faster than when using ISPF. The only way to shift left the development process and the testing process is if you provide a modern tools to be able to allow the developer to integrate the development process with the testing process. Faster creation of test data by the developers is extremely important, and it allows you to visualize the DBD graphically while you're making your code changes. So being able to bring the test data in with FileAid through the intuitive GUI interface is important, but it's also important to integrate a modern interface to be able to build your test cases that are required to test your code. Now, the developers, of course, as I said earlier, is going to look at test case creation from how that program is to work. That's about 50% of the test cases. On the QA side, they're going to look at it from a different perspective. So integrating those two processes together is going to broaden the scope of the test cases that are developed, and it gives you the ability to build all of the use cases that would be required to test all of the code. So, and be able to measure that so that you know the percentage of code that has been tested by the use cases that you've built. This also builds a set of repeatable and automated test cases that can be used for testing the code changes that you're making now, but it also provides a portfolio of test cases that can be used for testing whenever changes have to be made in the future. Being able to do program analysis and being able to dynamically draw the program calling chain allows you to visually see what that program is doing. You can see all the programs that are involved in the regression test process. It shows you all of the files and databases that are being used to test the process. And it allows you to have control over the process to be able to step back through your test scenarios so that you can go either forward or backward through the test process so that you can see how your program is actually working. It also allows you to export the table view, which is the bottom portion of the bottom portion of the view on the right, to be able to collect those artifacts for documentation purposes. This graphical representation is going to save you FTE cost in the for analysis time in your development process. This is program is CompuWare's total test. Debugging is also very, very important. I mean, being able to step through the code one line at a time is done through CompuWare's Expediter product that's integrated into the Topaz Workbench. It allows you to validate the code and how the logic works one step at a time, so that if you have a very complex program that you're trying to debug, it allows you the capability to analyze that program one step at a time so that you can debug it very, very quickly. And it will reduce the mean time to diagnosis and also the mean time to repair. It's very, very important to be able to integrate the monitoring of an application program or an IMS application after the code has been developed, after you've built your test cases and your test case scenarios. You want to integrate the process of being able to compare the before and after performance of that application coding change. You want to see the difference between new job runs and original job runs. You want to be able to understand where CPU is being consumed. And we've also incorporated a Jenkins plugin and also a BMC CompuWare Strobe API so that you can integrate the performance characteristics of your program into your CI/CD tool chain of choice. I think also integrating the Strobe capabilities into a GUI opens up the performance testing capabilities to new users of that, and also pushes the performance characteristics capabilities into the development tasks that developers can do, and also your QA testers can do. Of course, the last thing in that infinity loop from a development task perspective is being able to deploy effectively. ISPW is also integrated into the Topaz Workbench so that you can view the status of deployment requests. You can diagnose and fix issues with the suite of troubleshooting tools that are available in the Topaz Workbench. And it provides an intuitive hierarchical chart to help you pinpoint failures in the deployment process. You can remediate bottlenecks or other issues in the code promotion before you actually turn it over to the operations area. Those are the solutions that we have from a development task perspective. It includes everything that's required to understand very complex application programs. It incorporates that into the GUI interface. We also incorporate the capability to provide test data and use case scenarios, and the debugging capabilities with Expediter, and also the performance characteristics can be measured with Strobe, and then of course delivery with our source code manager, which is ISPW, for ensuring that delivery is done effectively, and all parts of that delivery process are incorporated successfully. So now let's look at the other side of this process, which is really being able to do change management correctly, both from a systems programmer perspective, making changes to your IMS environment, and also let's look at it from a DBA perspective, being able to make changes effectively to your DBD and PSB control blocks, whether your persona is either an experienced DBA or whether that persona might be a universal DBA that's coming into the IMS space to do management of those control blocks. This is the modernizing that IMS tool chain, and I've plugged in the solutions that BMC offers on this side of this infinity loop. As I said earlier, I'm not going to be talking about recovery solutions or database performance solutions or the monitoring solutions. I'm going to be talking specifically about automation from a change management perspective, which is solutions in the IMS TM space and solutions from a DBA perspective. Let's talk about DevOps from an IMS TM perspective. I'm specifically going to focus on our Jenkins plugin that we have built to allow you to create and edit delta lists. And delta lists are used on the mainframe to actually dynamically modify your IMS system. This particular plugin will allow you to check those delta lists before they're actually executed to ensure that you're not, are making changes to the IMS environment correctly. It also allows you to implement those changes using a delta list. We log all those changes in a history file so that those changes, if they don't result in the changes in effective use, result in the appropriate way of doing it, doing that change, you can quickly back those changes out so that your systems can be dynamically brought back to the way they were before the change was implemented. We use a ZOSMF REST API to submit and run those jobs on ZOS. As you can see on the right, I have a diagram. The development team in this case has requested an add transaction. We're going to house that source code. In this case, the example that I'm using is GitHub. That could be ISPW as well. When the add request is initiated, we use Jenkins to build the build steps that are required to make that change effectively. Once that change has been checked and executed, it's going to be shipped over using the REST API to make that change using the technology that we have on the mainframe. And once that's done, then you've made the dynamic changes. The tool of choice, as I said earlier, is really the Jenkins workflow or Jenkins tool to integrate system changes into a DevOps tool chain. We use Jenkins for the automation component. The Jenkins plugin supported actions, of course, as I said earlier, is the creation and editing and checking and execution of delta lists on the mainframe to make those changes dynamically. We use the ZOSMF REST API to submit the jobs, so the actual technology to make those changes are actually being done on the mainframe. You're using your GUI interface or the Jenkins plugin to implement those build steps. And when you look at this Jenkins plugin, we have other Jenkins plugins for our other solutions. You select the BMC DevOps for Delta Plus plugin, and that brings you into the workflow. The first thing that you respond to is what action do you want to take. In this example, what I've done is we are adding a transaction. What is the mainframe connection options? Where do you want that change to be dynamically done? What is the change manager for IMS TM options? In this case, it's an add transaction. We provide you with all the parameters that would be required to make those changes to that system macro. And then, of course, we generate the job, which is the Delta list batch job that would be executed on the mainframe to make that change. As once that Delta list has been executed from within the Jenkins workspace, you can look at the JES output from that execution of that Delta list. You select the job name, and what happens is it brings the JES output back to the workspace so that you can see if that Delta list is executed correctly without having to go to SDSF on the mainframe to check out the status. All of the systems macros can be changed through this Jenkins plugin. The application macro, transaction macro, database macro, root code, terminal, LTerm, and subpool macros can all be changed using this Jenkins plugin. Let's look at the other side of the operational equation. Let's look at change management from a DBA perspective. This is the BMC Change Manager for IMS. Both of the solution on the TM side and on the DBA side were released earlier this year. They are available from us now. BMC Change Manager for IMS uses a graphical editor to make changes to the DBD and PSB control blocks. It's using our new UXF GUI interface, which is written in HTML5 under the covers. It is the GUI interface that we will be using in other areas. We use our installation procedures using this GUI, as well as our MaxM Database Advisor for doing database type management functions from a DBA perspective, as well as these change manager solutions. This change manager allows you to activate changes to those control blocks, and it also builds the backout process. If those control blocks don't result in the type of changes that you want, you can quickly back those changes out because we provide the backout process. This change management tool supports both the IMS Gen process as well as the IMS cataloged and managed ACBs. It is a seamless interface we determine through our Environment Explorer. We dynamically determine where in the environment the catalog and manage ACBs is implemented. And if those are implemented in your environment, then Change Manager will automatically use the functions that are required to implement changes in the catalog and maintain those changes consistently with the managed ACB environment, which is your directory data sets. I think the heart of this particular solution is the analysis of those changes. And these changes are built either one change at a time, or it can be multiple changes that might have to be made as a result of an application requirement that requires changes to those control blocks. We provide a number of applications as well in the solution. One of those applications is we allow you to interactively build IMS type 2 commands. You select the type 2 command that you want to execute. We provide all of the options for that command. And as you are selecting the option, it dynamically builds the format of that command so that you don't have to have a manual. You don't have to understand really the format of that command. We build it for you, and then you can execute it from within the console. We also have added to the tool set the ability to dynamically alter the buffer pools, any IMS buffer pool, so that if you possibly are having performance problems, not getting the appropriate hit ratios in specific buffers, you can dynamically adjust those buffers from within the GUI. The four things that we really wanted to do with the change manager for IMS is we wanted to simplify the IMS maintenance process so that you can effectively make changes to those control blocks. We wanted to ease the use of supporting IMS, both from an experienced DBA perspective as well as from a universal DBA perspective. We wanted to reduce the risk of making inaccurate changes to the IMS environment from these control block perspective. And we wanted to reduce skills gap between the universal DBA and the experienced DBA. So this is a solution that addresses all of these things. When we look at the reducing the skills gap perspective from the persona of a skilled DBA, most experienced DBAs have been doing IMS DBA work maybe for decades. They're comfortable with the gen process. The gen process, DBD gen, PSB gen, ACB gen process, they've been doing that for a very long time. They may not be very comfortable using the IMS catalog. That might be new to them. They're experienced using ISPF, understands JCL and batch jobs. As I'm working with customers today, what I'm finding is that the IMS space, because of people retiring and new people coming into this environment, these DBAs are comfortable using DDL. Maybe they come from the distributed space, or maybe they come from the DB2 environment. So they understand DDL. They don't understand the gen macro process. They're used to using a catalog if they came from DB2 to support database activities. They're experienced using GUI, and that may be their preferred platform for doing their work. And they're less experienced creating and running JCL. So what we want to do with this solution is meld these two skill sets together so that both the experienced DBA understands how to use the catalog and understands the managed ACB process, and the universal DBA can quickly step into a DBA job that requires changes to these control blocks and can be effective at making those changes the first time, every time. Everything that's done within the change manager for IMS, a solution is done from a project perspective. So when you come into the GUI, you're going to define the definition of what a project is. That could be one database, it could be one PSB, it could be multiple databases and PSBs at the same time. The project will be housed in the change manager repository. You will make all your DBD and PSB changes. They will be syntactically correct and logically correct. The analysis engine, which is the heart of the product, will determine whether those changes are accurate. It'll tell you what needs to be done and how that needs to be done to make those changes effective. And it's going to generate a set of JCL and it's going to be the same types of JCL, no matter if you're doing one database change, one PSP change, or multiple control block changes at the same time. And then it gives you the capability to manage those projects. It provides you with a historical representation of what changes were done, when, by whom, and how those changes were implemented. We wanted to reduce the risk of making DBD and PSP changes. So the impact analysis, as I'm showing in this slide at the right, shows you what will happen and why that change, what will happen and why that change is required. The generated change jobs will not miss steps. So whether you're just stepping into the IMS environment or whether you're an experienced DBA, the changes that and the jobs that are going to be generated are going to be the same. You will not miss any steps. You'll do the changes right the first time, every time. And we also are going to provide a job to roll back those changes so that if those changes don't affect the desired change, you can roll those changes back out. I think what's really interesting about the GUI here is that it will provide you a way to toggle between the gen format as well as the DDL format for those control block changes. I think this is going to provide a communication vehicle between an experienced DBA as well as the universal DBA for them to understand what those control block changes look like and how they will be implemented. It will also provide a communication vehicle to the distributed application developer who wants to access the IMS databases, because they're going to understand the DDL format. So being able to see both the gen format and the DDL format is very important for effective communication. Any changes that will require DBRC changes, we will also generate the DBRC information to implement those changes. An example of that would be if you need to add an additional partition to a HALDB database, we're going to generate, of course, the DBRC changes to implement those partitions in DBRC. The generated jobs to implement those changes are going to be one of 5 different job types. The README file actually describes who does what, when, and what is going to be done. The setup job is always going to back up your control blocks before the changes are made, and it's going to populate all of the project data sets that are going to be required to implement this change. The commit one JCL actually does backups of your database and actually moves your project files from the change manager repository into your IMS libraries. Now, it stops at that point and gives you a breakpoint so that you can do application things that you need to do before these control block changes need to be made. The commit to job then will interface to our Delta Plus product to dynamically make changes to your IMS system for these control block changes. And then, of course, as I said earlier, we generate a rollback job so that if those changes don't provide the desired effect, what we will do is roll back those changes to before the changes were made. We have a component of the tool that is supporting applications. We provide some diagnosis tools and Explorer tools. The Explorer, Environment Explorer, when the GUI is actually installed, we go out and do an auto discovery of the environment. And we'll discover all of the IMS environments, whether they're located locally or whether they're located in a plex, whether they're located across the globe. We'll find the IMS environments, and we also at that time determine whether the IMS catalog and managed ACBs are implemented in your environment, and we'll show that in the Environment Explorer results inside the GUI. We give you the capability to explore IMS data. We provide a spoofy capability so that you can write SQL to get at your IMS data. We also provide tools to be able to view the IMS catalog and the metadata in the IMS catalog. From a tuning perspective, as I said earlier, the tool that we provide is the dynamic buffer pool editor to allow you to dynamically change buffer pools for areas of that are having poor performance. And then, of course, from the implementation side, we give you the capability to issue those IMS commands. We dynamically build the IMS command through the GUI. We also give you the online deployment option, which is either doing the online change or actually doing the import process if the catalog is installed in your environment. And then, of course, we provide all of the JCL generation capability that for the control blocks that you're changing. I will also tell you that we've incorporated reporting capabilities in the diagnose and explore portion of this so that you can determine whether the control blocks have been built correctly. You can do comparison between old and new control blocks, and also can do cross-referencing reporting. We had to build that inside this GUI interface because and rewrite that so that we could support managed ACBs in the IMS catalog. What I want to do is leave you with some statistics, why DevOps is important. These statistics are also from a Forrester report where Forrester actually interviewed about 400 or surveyed 400 mainframe users. What is important about this is that 77% believe that modernizing mainframe development tools will increase velocity by 18%, and 62% said modernizing mainframe development tools increases quality of applications 23%. I think those two metrics are very, very important because in a digital economy, you need to make changes very, very quickly. You need to have an agile platform to do that. This particular survey is available by the link that I have at the bottom of this slide. So you can go reference all of the statistics and that report. My contact information is here. Please, if you have questions after this session is over, you can reach out to me and I will answer your questions. I think that there's other things, housekeeping things that we need to cover here. Please submit your session feedback. This session is session AD. There's a QR code here that will help you with doing that feedback. And also, don't forget, you can contribute to the GSE charity event. It's for the Royal National Lifeboat Institute and Guide Dogs. For every pound that you contribute, you'll get a raffle ticket for that. And there's the link provided here. And also, I think it's very, very important for you, if you're not a member of the GSE currently, this provides all of the benefits for becoming a member. And there's a link here where you can do that. With that, Dom, let's turn it over for questions. Are there questions?
Okay, so can everybody hear me? They've not, we haven't got any submitted questions in, but what I've done is I've unmuted, well, not unmuted everybody, but let everybody unmute themselves. So if you want to ask a question, you're more than welcome to either put it in the post in the chat, or you can just verbally say it now, but you'll have to unmute yourself, but you can unmute yourself from this session. I mean, I've got one question to kick off, if that's okay, as we've not got any in the chat session, and that is, that was a great session. What I was thinking was couple of things. One to do with things like you were talking about Topaz and some of those tools there before. Now, are those available for all languages? You know, is it could it be for COBOL and assembler, for example?
Yes, we have editor.
If you've you know, if you're doing COBOL and then maybe a module's in assembler and then going back to COBOL, that kind of thing.
Yes, there's editors in there for assembler, COBOL, Rex, JCL, PL1. Those are all included in that GUI, so that you can understand the code no matter what type of code you're working with.
Excellent, thanks for that. And another question which is on my mind, when you were talking about the DBA sort of utilities, where you've got the Army change manager with the making DBA changes. Now, does that can that interface with IMS DRD, or is that sort of, will it just sort of do the type 2 commands and you'd have to feed that in to DRD?
We do support DRD on our Delta product. All of the technology to do that those system changes are done in Delta, and Delta will coexist with DRD. So if DRD is the tool of choice for making dynamic system changes, we will coexist with that. When we did the rewrite of our Delta Plus product to incorporate the change management Jenkins plugin, we wanted to allow you to integrate the IMS system definition process into your tool chain of choice. That was really the first time that we, on the operational side of the equation, we actually implemented integration into your CI/CD workflow or tool chain of choice. That was our first movement on the operational side to do that. When I was talking about change management from a DBA perspective, what I'm talking about there is the automation side of that CI/CD requirement. There's 3 parts to that: continuous integration. The second part is continuous delivery and continuous deployment, and the third one of that is automation. And so what we're doing there is we are doing automation from a DBA perspective to allow that DBA to be effective making those changes, and to do it with an analysis engine to make sure that those changes are syntactically and logically correct, no matter who does it. And the resulting job steps, no matter who does it, will be the same, and those job steps will be missed.
Yeah, okay, that's clear. And a couple of supplementary questions just from me on the life cycle of doing this. Presumably, we're really talking about a development tool, speed to getting your development testing and systems testing done so that it can go to live. Presumably, you don't really have people actually using this to put things into live, for example. Obviously, it will speed your momentum into getting things into live, but presumably this is mainly a testing tool and to get finished all your systems and testing and that kind of thing.
Well, actually, it has component pieces that will help with the deployment to the operational side, and that is ISPW, which is integrated into that Workbench GUI, and also when you're talking about Strobe, because that is a GUI interface that can be integrated into that tool chain of choice as well. So by implementing strobe in that GUI, what you've done is you've opened the performance testing up to the person developing the code and the person doing the testing of the code before that code goes over to the operational side, which is typically where the performance people are located. So
Okay.
you can get ahead of the game before it's actually turned on in production.
Yeah, I get that, and presumably you can spurt things out into Endeavour at the appropriate point as well if you've got Endeavour.
Absolutely. We're not, with the CompuWare solution, we're not asking you to rip and replace what you've already implemented, because this DevOps process that people are moving to is not a flip of the switch. You probably have tools in your environment. Maybe you have GitHub for your source code manager rather than ISPW. So we're allowing you to plug where you need to fill that hole so that you can make your environment more agile and can complete the integration of the development process and testing into one GUI interface.
Excellent. So, I mean, there was up to 11 people on this session, and there's still 10 people in there. So if you've got any other questions, we've got about 5 minutes before the end. If anybody wants to shout up now, you don't have to just post it via the chat. You can just unmute yourself and ask the question. It would be really good if we could get a question from somebody else other than me. Don't be shy. Okay, so seems like we haven't got any other questions from others, but that's fine. What we'd like to say is, on behalf of the audience, I'd like to thank you very much for doing this presentation. And obviously, there's feedback at the end, so please fill those feedbacks forms in. They are available via the agenda. If you go into the individual agenda sessions, if you just click on the title of the presentation, then you will get a link to be able to fill that feedback out. Or I think right at the start of the slide foils that you had, there was a QR link as well. And Dwayne perfectly said what the for the charity, you can fill out those links for the charity links and etc. as well. So without further ado, I'd like to say thank you very much, Dwayne, for doing this presentation. I thought it was very thoughtful and interesting, and there were certainly a lot of tools in there which seem to be able to get you to speed up your development processes, which will always be a good thing. And probably for people that are doing IMS catalog, I think that will also be of benefit to people, so they can see the DRD versus the non-DRD parts of that. So I think for many different people, this should be, some good exploitation techniques there for those various products. So thank you very much indeed for that. And without further ado, I'll probably end the session soon, but if we could just give a round of applause, virtual round of applause.
Well, thank you so much, Dominic. Thank you for having me. And for all of those attending, please enjoy the rest of your GSE.
Yeah. And yeah, the next session we've got one tomorrow coming up for the IMS stream, just to give that a plug, at 12 noon UK time, is nuts and bolts of IMS lock management. So that's the next session, which is going to be tomorrow. So if you're interested in that, then go for that. All of the IMS sessions are actually on the agenda sessions. They're actually in color coded, and they're all, I'd describe it as avocado, the name of the actual color of each of the IMS sessions. Maybe avocado, or maybe I don't know, grey-green, but I thought avocado was the color we've been given. So just have a look down the agenda and book your session in for the next one. But thanks very much, everybody, for your attendance. and that went really well. So thanks very much, everybody who attended, all of you. Thanks very much, and have a good rest of your conference. Thank you.